Hi, I'm Malika Bilal.
I'm Ahmed Shahabuddin, and you're in the stream. Today, the young and the faithful.
While a majority of millennials in the United States are turning away from religion, there are some running towards it.
My name is Asma Uddin, and I'm a Director of Strategy at the Washington, D.C. based Center for Islam and Religious Freedom, and I am in the stream.
Can you be young and religious? It depends who you ask. According to the Pew Research Center, American millennials are less religious than their older counterparts. But of course, there are young people who take their faith seriously.
So how do these faithful millennials navigate the growing secularism among their peers? Joining us to discuss this, Hannah Spiro, the Rabbi and Director of Education at the Hill Chavurah in Washington, D.C. In Half Moon Bay, California, Sabina Khan Ibarra, she founded Muslima Montage, an online platform for Muslim women.
In Toronto, Canada, is Shani Nath. She's a journalist and considers herself non-religious. And in Chicago, Illinois, writer and Christian Chakolas. Welcome everyone to the stream. Now, one of our community members pitched this show idea to us. That's why we're doing it. So it's centered around a recent episode of Aziz Ansari's blockbuster Netflix show. You can see it here on my laptop, Master of None. Now, in the religion episode, Aziz's character, who is a Muslim, is introduced to pork bacon as a child, and he falls in love. Now, he goes on to secretly eat pork, something that practicing Muslims don't do, and he even manages to get his younger, more devout cousin to get in on some of that action. You can see them here really loving these ribs. Now, he hides it from his family until finally confessing to his mother at a family dinner that he doesn't follow all the same rules that she does. And he goes on to say, I'm not that religious and I eat pork, but it's okay because I'm a good person and I'm 33 years old and I can make those decisions. I eat what I want and I want the crispy pork with broccoli. Sabina, you watched this episode and it was actually your blog post that caught our community members' eye. Tell us what you thought of this episode.
So I'm a writer, so I thought in terms of the writing, it was really done well. It was nuanced. It was it dealt with identity. The only thing that I had an issue with was that I understand that it's a fiction based on Ansari's life, so I appreciate that. But he went on to introduce his character, Naveed, as you said, and he's this impressionable young kid who's religious, and I felt like he became palatable to the audience only after he, accepted or he just broke his fast and ate pork. And I just thought that was a little problematic in this, current political environment, climate, because we're already otherized people who are, who call themselves religious.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. The reason, a lot of people like yourself have been fans of the show, but also criticizing it, or at least raising some issues. For example, Sadiq on Twitter saying, although I appreciate the attempts at clarifying misconceptions about Muslims, the episode reinforced the idea that Muslims need to be humanized. Again, kind of touching on this idea of othering and the need to be humanized. But Ishani, I wanted to know what you thought of this other comment from Zinat saying that the episode allowed for people to feel that a close relationship with family or community can still be possible without sacrificing your beliefs. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. This episode was very close to my own personal experience, actually. I was raised Hindu, so not eating beef, but not really understanding the religious connection and why that was done. And I didn't personally feel that connection. I was just doing it to please my mother, please my grandmother, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I actually, this episode led me to have a conversation with my grandmother to find out more about why it bothers her that I now do eat beef. And it was a conversation I don't know that we ever would have had. And that actually bothered me in a way, but it was important. And it made me realize that we need to be thinking more about this rather than othering people as a group.
Shani, tell us about that conversation, though, because you set the scene really nicely in this blog post. This is on Flare, talking Master of None's religion episode with my devout Dadi, your grandmother. And you were at a fancy dinner or lunch. You were at a fancy outing, and it was to celebrate, I think, your uncle's 60th birthday. And the menu had some delicious meat options. And then what happened?
Yeah, so it was very fancy. They had, the meat, fish, general options, and there was braised beef short ribs. And I was actually sitting right next to my daddy. And so I turned to her and I asked, you know, would it bother you if I ordered this? And she said, whatever, you always do it anyway. First of all, I don't do it all the time anyway. But I didn't realize that, you know, she hit on something, that this is something that she's had to live with. She's had to live with her kids and her grandkids doing things that bother her because she's very devout, and me not understanding why. So our conversation was really interesting because I pushed her to explain to me what it was that bothered her, and she realized it's a respect thing. It's me respecting her as a person and her respecting cows as part of her religion. So it's just the chain of respect, I think, is what we came to understand.
Hannah, can you relate to that at all?
I was just thinking that I absolutely can. I was thinking about how in my tradition, in Judaism, the people Israel means wrestling with God. And in watching Aziz Ansari's show, I almost felt like the most powerful moment of connection between him and his family that I saw was when he texted a surah from the Quran to his mother.
Yeah.
And without understanding the context of the surah and if it actually applies to what he was trying to get at, the idea of engaging with religion maybe as being more important than following tradition to a T in terms of connection and showing respect to one's family.
So spoiler alert online, I'm just going to explain what Hannah was referencing. So at the end of the episode, it's okay, we've spoiled it, but it's a good one. You should still check it out if you are a Netflix subscriber. So at the end of the episode, it ends with Aziz actually going to take a Quran that he had not touched in a lot of years. He opens it and he finds the chapter or surah in the book that talks about to you your religion and to me my religion, and those two things being okay. And he sends that to his mother, and they all make up. So I understand that reference, and I get that. But I wonder, in your own life, what does being religious mean to you?
To me, it means showing kavod, showing honor, showing respect to my tradition. And for me, it means having a relationship with not just my Jewish community and with Torah, but also with God. But I don't think it needs to mean that for all Jews. I've known Jews that identify as religious without having a belief in God or using God language. I do, but I don't think it's necessary.
No, I mean, you know, on that point, whether it's necessary or not, a lot of people feel as though they can't necessarily act comfortably for a variety of reasons. And Riza on Twitter said, and you know, this is not exactly the same thing, but definitely young people are forced to suppress their beliefs. Very common to see them disillusioned with religion altogether. Christian, I don't know if that applies to you, but you know, that is a generalization you often hear.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that a lot of that comes from the fact that millennials, I know that a lot of people I grew up in a very Catholic town. There's a big Catholic church a block away from our school, and a lot of the kids went there. And none of them, I don't think, are still practicing Catholics, because we grew up, our generation grew up, at least and especially Christians, which is what I can speak to. We were brought to church, we were told to believe these things, but there's very little in the way of telling us why we should believe these things. And millennials are, I think we're a little too skeptical to just follow along with that.
So did your skepticism lead to belief or disbelief? Where do you fall in that?
Well, a skeptical belief, if I can kind of take the easy way out.
There's no nuance. You're not allowed.
I was not raised a Christian at all. I was raised by a very secular family, but a very belief in religion respecting family. So I think that was what allowed me to kind of come to religion on my own as I got older. If I had grown up steeped in it, I'm sure that I probably wouldn't be here right now.
So in picking up on that point, Ishani, I want to show this to all of our audience. Now, this is information from Pew Research Center. The percentage of American adults who are religiously unaffiliated, sorted by generation, and this is statistics that come from 2014, so a few years ago, but millennials ages 18 to 33, 29% of them, according to this research, say that they are religiously unaffiliated, and that's compared to other generations. You can see here, 21% of Gen Xers, 34 to 49, Boomers, 50 to 68, 16% are unaffiliated, and the silent generation, grandparents and a little bit older, 9%, 69 to 86%. What do you make of these figures? What do you think that tells us about where we are today?
It's hard to say, because I think the, skepticism and to Christian's points, like those, I completely relate to that. And I think that's part of my journey. I actually went to a Christian school and came from a Hindu family, and my father is an atheist. So I had a lot of different factors in my upbringing, and I think it was hard for me to find a religion or a group that I wholeheartedly could give myself to, and I think that skepticism really played a role in that. Whether or not that's a generational thing or not, I have no idea. I think a big factor for me too is because I was born and raised in Canada, but I happen to be a different color, doing the traditions and learning more about my culture and religion that I was brought up in became kind of a way to explain the Indian side of me that I didn't necessarily connect with on a personal level, but I was always being asked, where are you from? Where are you from? And Canada wasn't going to cut it. So if I celebrated Diwali or if I knew about Holi, that kind of would give me something to talk about, if that makes sense. But I didn't come from a personal place necessarily.
A lot of people... Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I wanted to piggyback off of that a little. I remember when I was in high school, growing up in a liberal Chicago suburb, there was not a lot of religion in my kind of social group. So I remember for me, religion was also a way for me to kind of set myself apart and be different. And I think that's an interesting counterpoint to what Ishani was just saying. I just remember it was also a way for me to kind of explain myself and define my identity, but in a kind of inverse way.
Yeah, almost the flip side of what she was saying there. And then, when it comes to family and religion and how we all relate to each other, we have a tweet that kind of, frames it very in a macro perspective, saying, I believe in the core principles of religion, while the older generation are more ritualistic in nature. And we can unpack that in a bit. Oh, you already want to unpack that.
It doesn't make sense to me. I feel like ritual is all about core principles, right?
And whether you can make that delineation, you're saying that you can't separate them.
Yeah. If it's ritual, it's because you're focusing on what's... So my tradition, we call it kavanah, we call it intention. And I think that what makes something a real ritual, is when you have that kavanah, you have that intention, you're focusing on whatever principles or values made you want to do that act or have that behavior in the first place.
Yeah, and motivation, of course, it matters. But in this particular case, Joel has his own take on it in terms of like what is the difference between different generations' family. Take a listen, and then Shabina, I want to hear from you.
I think the biggest difference between how young people today practice their faith and their parents is that in the past, there was all these things attached to faith, politics and the relationship with science and morality and ethics, that they were just taken for granted altogether. And young people today have a little more of a complex relationship. They can hang on to certain core tenets of their faith while differing in opinions in these other categories, while before you couldn't do that.
Sabina, thoughts on either of those comments?
Well, I was just going to say, I do, to what you were talking about before, I can speak, to the Muslim aspect, is that the ritualistic in terms of, I consider myself a religious person, but I don't observe the hijab, which is a head covering. So to some people, I would be considered not religious. So I guess it's what you define as ritualistic, what you yourself understand as what's important to you when you say the basic tenets of your religion. So it's a self-identification of religious, and then what you define as religious to yourself. Like there is ritualistic, which is prayers, some would say prayers, the hijab, and other things. But then again, like there is the intention of what you do, the good that you do, the being kind to others, giving to the poor. you know, social justice issues. These things are, you know, some people would not consider them basic, part of the religion. But I do, and so that's my definition. So that's
and
that's
I like
very
that
important.
I like that you brought up intention there, because it links it right back to what Hannah was saying a little bit earlier. Hannah, I want to show our audience something that happened this weekend. Here's a couple of pictures on my laptop. You were ordained as a rabbi just yesterday. This happened on Sunday, so I'm going to flip through some of these photos here. This is you, and this is, I guess these are the other congregants?
Those are my classmates.
Classmates. Okay, so everyone on this stage became a rabbi
yesterday.
Yesterday. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So it seems like you might have come a long way from your teen years, because I know you were telling our producers ahead of the show that you, as a teen, on Yom Kippur, which is a very auspicious, a holy day in the Jewish calendar, as a teen, you felt a little bit differently than a rabbi might feel nowadays. Tell us about that.
Yeah, okay, so 1 year only. I was 15 or 16, I forget how old. I don't know what possessed me. I think a friend was having a birthday, and they were going to go to Georgetown, and they were going to go to a hookah bar, and they were going to have delicious food and stay out late. And I started wondering, what would it feel like to not be in shul, not be in synagogue on Yom Kippur, and not to fast, and to, you know, eat and drink on Yom Kippur. And I got
Which is the day typically you should be fasting?
Correct, correct. And in synagogue, you know, during the night and again for all the next day. I was really curious what it would feel like not to. I can't believe my parents let me, but they did. I celebrated my friend's birthday with them. I didn't fast at all, did not show up in shul all evening or all day. And afterwards, I realized that wasn't for me. I mean, I was happy to do that, but I said, okay, I should do that on a different day. and I realized, like, I don't know, I'm happy to be in a tradition where I can have a degree of frivolity in my life, but not on Yom Kippur.
And that's you, right? And we just heard from Sabina, you know, how personal religion is and how it manifests itself. And a lot of the comments that we've been getting online, in fact, one from Dean's is right on this topic. And, you know, I kind of have to ask you, Ishani, he says, or she, I should say, I think for many people in my generation, practicing beliefs has become an intimate thing. It's shared with God alone and not pointed outward. Now, I know you're atheist, but do you see this to be true? Is this, on your journey, did that make sense? Was that part of the struggle, maybe, you know, and the pressures growing up in a Hindu family?
It's funny, I actually feel a little bit of the opposite. Like, I think that relationship with God, for a lot of people, yes, it's an intimate thing, it's a personal journey. But a huge component of religion that I always was a little bit jealous of, in a way, because I wasn't super religious, was the community aspect. And I really saw that with the kids who were quite devout and went to temple, they engaged with, you know, Hindu activities, and they all knew each other, they all hung out, and they all shared kind of the same practices and excitement over certain days that I just didn't have. I was kind of navigating my life on my own, it felt like, and that was its own thing. But I think, yeah, I'm surprised. I wouldn't say it's kind of a personal thing. I think it's very community oriented from my understanding, from the outside looking in kind of thing.
And I don't think you're alone there. Take a look here. This is also information that comes from Pew Research Center. 74% of millennials say there is more than one true way to interpret the teachings of their faith. And for many of them, that is that communal aspect, that is either being in synagogue on Yom Kippur because it is a holy day, or that is fasting during the month of Ramadan for Muslims. I want to take that thought, though, that notion, and push it over to you, Christian, because you wrote this blog post for Patheos. My name is Christian Chakolas, and I am a millennial Christian. And you go on to say, I felt the need not to profess my faith, but to confess it, like it's shameful or embarrassing. Can you explain the feelings behind that?
Yeah, well, that was when I was growing up in a white, liberal, secular town, and I remember I would tell people I'm a Christian, and I would get, why do you read the Bible? I remember I would carry a Bible around at school, and I would get weird looks when I would pull it out to read during study hall, things like that. And I think the reason was because none of my peers really knew much about Christianity other than, oh, it's the religion where they don't like gays. It's the religion where they tell us who we can have sex with and who we can't and what kind of sex we can have. That's what religion is to a lot of people my age. That's especially what Christianity is to a lot of people who've grown up in that culture. So for me, you know, I was not a conservative Christian fundamentalist, so it was hard for me to try to say, yes, I'm a Christian, no, I don't believe those things. So.
Yeah, I feel like it's perpetuated too, like by a lot of the new atheists, like Sam Harris and Bill Maher, where they made this false dichotomy of intellectualism versus religiosity. So you're either, they make it as if you're either, you know, a thinking person or you're just someone who follows. And so it's very hard for people who say, no, we do think for ourselves and we are religious, to find a space in this place where media just shows the negative of the, you know, religion, or, you know, acts that are done because of religion, and then to have these people who tell you that, like Sam Harris and Bill Maher.
And you know, I don't want to over kind of emphasize this, but on a personal level, you know, we always joke, you know, I don't wear the hijab, but I am.
It would be a little weird if you did.
It would be, and perhaps not that unbelievable, but the more important thing is that my name in many ways is my hijab. It's an identifier where even though I don't pray 5 times a day as a devout Muslim would or should, for me, you know, it's your religious identity and your cultural identity that are compounded, and unpacking that, I think, is a theme that I'm noticing in all of this, and it's one that we got a video comment from Daniel about this, or actually not a comment. Let me read this to you. He wrote us on Facebook saying, so this guy's a Korean American. He comes from a Christian family. And he says, from a distance, it appeared to me that my cousins were not conflicted about their cultural and religious identities being tied together, and they were being rewarded by God for being able to hold these two pieces of their identity together. He goes on to say, I could see that my cousins were being placed into a narrative of immigrant success that was valuable for my parents and their generation. It became clear to me that we engaged with our religious communities for their sake. No matter how much I no longer think of myself as a Christian, I will still participate in the religious practices for my parents' sake when I'm around them. Sabina, can you relate to that?
Yes. I mean, I'm also a Generation Xer, but I feel like everybody has a path, and I do see that you hold on to tradition and you have a respect for tradition and you continue it just for your parents' sake. But I feel like that's also, again, minimizing people who choose to be religious, who do pray 5 times a day, who don't eat pork, or, you know, whatever they consider the basic.
Like Christian.
Yeah, Christian. Yeah, exactly. Any practicing religious person. So I feel like that kind of narrative takes away from those people again, and even though it is somebody's truth, I just wanted to emphasize that.
Hannah, you look like you want to jump in there.
I was thinking about something, and I agree with what you're saying, and I'm also thinking about something that Christian said before. I was thinking about how, like, the idea of being ashamed of being a practicing religious person because of the ways in which religion can oppress people. I just want voices like your all's lifted up more to, you know, be louder about religion that is not only not oppressive, but that is healing and inclusive and brings people together.
And it's a perception thing. You know, religion does all of that, arguably, but it's what you perceive it to do, and that's what I think.
And of course, how you use it, how that individual person uses it. But I'm glad we're having this conversation here, because I think, to Hannah's point, what she wants is for you all to raise your voices. Yes. I hear you very loud and clear. Our community does as well. I'll end with this tweet from Neslihan, who says, just like people, religions also come in all different shapes and sizes. It's about the right dosage, because too much religion can make us go blind. That's one person's perspective. Unfortunately, we're going to have to end this part of the conversation right here. We're going to take all of our guests to the online post show at aljazeera.com/thestream. We'll see you there.